You thought that was the end. It wasn't. It was your lesson, and if you're wise, it will become your launch pad. Defeat only destroys the man who has no imagination, no will, no fight left. But you are not finished. You are forming your counterattack. The world remembers the victors, not the victims. This is your time to choose. Lie broken or rise strategic. Subscribe to our channel if you're ready to master your mind. And tell us, where are you watching from? You thought that was the end. It wasn't. It was your lesson. And if you're wise, it will become your launch pad. Defeat only destroys the man who has no imagination, no will, no fight left. But you are not finished. You are forming your counterattack. The world remembers the victors, not the victims. This is your time to choose. Lie broken or rise strategic. Subscribe to our channel if you're ready to master your mind, and tell us, where are you watching from? Listen to me carefully. I have been defeated more times than most men have attempted victory. Waterloo, Leipzig, the Russian winter that consumed my Grande Armée like a beast devouring prey. I know defeat intimately. I have stared into its face, felt its cold breath, tasted its bitter truth. But here is what separates emperors from peasants. I studied my defeats like a surgeon studies anatomy. I dissected every failure, every miscalculation, every moment where fortune turned her back on me. And in that dissection, I found something remarkable. Defeat is not your enemy. Defeat is your teacher wearing a mask. Most men flee from defeat. They run from the pain, the embarrassment, the crushing weight of public failure. They bury their heads in distraction, in blame, in the comfortable lie that they were simply unlucky. This is why most men remain ordinary. You will not be ordinary. Defeat has anatomy. It has structure. It has predictable patterns that, once understood, become your greatest strategic advantage. Every defeat contains within it the blueprint for your next victory, but you must have the courage to examine it. First, understand this. Defeat is always preceded by overconfidence or under-preparation. Always. I invaded Russia with supreme confidence but insufficient supply lines. I underestimated the British resolve at Waterloo. Every great defeat in history follows this pattern. A leader who either believed too much in his invincibility or prepared too little for his opposition. But here's what most people don't understand. About defeat, it reveals your true character faster than any victory ever could. Victory can mask weaknesses. Success can hide fatal flaws. Defeat strips you naked and shows you exactly who you are when everything goes wrong. And that revelation is priceless. When I was exiled to Elba, I could have chosen to see myself as finished, a fallen emperor, a cautionary tale. Instead, I chose to see myself as a strategist in temporary retreat. I studied my mistakes. I planned my return. I used isolation as preparation. 100 days later, I was back in Paris. This is the anatomy of defeat. It is temporary unless you make it permanent. It is instructive unless you choose to ignore its lessons. It is preparation unless you waste it on self-pity. Your defeats are not accidents. They are appointments. Appointments with reality. Appointments with your limitations. Appointments with the gap between your ambitions and your abilities. But let me ask you this. When you face defeat, what do? Do you retreat into comfort? Do you blame circumstances? Do you tell yourself you're unlucky? Or do you do what conquerors do? Conquerors interrogate their defeats. They ask ruthless questions. Where did I miscalculate? What did I underestimate? What resources did I lack? What assumptions proved false? They treat defeat like intelligence gathered from enemy territory. Valuable, actionable, essential. Every defeat teaches you something about timing, something about preparation, something about your opponent, something about yourself. The question is not whether you will be defeated. You will. The question is whether you will be educated by it. I was defeated by winter in Russia, so I learned to fight in winter. I was defeated by coalition at Leipzig, so I learned to divide coalitions. I was defeated by hesitation at Waterloo, So I learned that victory belongs to the decisive. Each defeat made me more dangerous, not less. Each failure sharpened my edge, not dulled it. Each setback became setup for the next campaign. This is your first lesson in turning defeat into victory. Stop running from your failures and start studying them. Stop seeing them as evidence of your inadequacy and start seeing them as intelligence about your next approach. Defeat is not the end of your story. It is the plot twist that makes your comeback legendary, but only if you have the courage to learn from it instead of simply surviving it. Your defeats are not destroying you. They are preparing you. The question is, preparing you for what? That depends entirely on how wisely you choose to use them. Wars are won twice. First in the mind of the commander, then on the field of battle. If you lose the first war, the second becomes impossible. If you win the first war, the second becomes inevitable. Your mind is not just a battlefield. It is the battlefield. Everything else is mere execution. I conquered Europe, not because I had the largest armies. I often fought outnumbered, not because I had the best weapons. My enemies often matched my artillery. I conquered Europe because I first conquered the territory between my ears. I controlled my thoughts like I controlled my troops, with discipline, with strategy, with absolute command. Most men are at war with themselves and don't even know it. They fight external battles while losing the internal one. They worry about what others think, while their own thoughts run wild and undisciplined. They focus on controlling circumstances while their minds spiral into chaos. This is why they lose. Every defeat begins in the mind. Every victory begins there, too. When I stood before the pyramids and told my soldiers they were making history, I was not speaking to their bodies, I was speaking to their minds. When I crossed the Alps with elephants, impossible, they said, I was not just moving troops, I was moving belief. When I returned from Elba and marched toward Paris, soldiers sent to arrest me joined my ranks instead. Why? Because I had already won the battle in their minds. But here's what most people don't understand about the mind as battlefield. You are fighting multiple enemies simultaneously: fear, doubt, distraction, comfort, past failures, future anxieties. These are not abstract concepts. They are active opponents with tactics, strategies, and the will to defeat you. Fear whispers that you are not ready. Doubt questions your abilities. Distraction pulls your focus in 17 directions. Comfort tells you that tomorrow is soon enough. Past failures remind you of every time you've fallen short. Future anxieties paint disasters that may never come. Each of these enemies has one goal: to prevent you from taking the actions that lead to victory. So how do you win this internal war? First, you must accept that this battle never ends. There is no final victory over fear, no permanent defeat of doubt. These enemies regroup, adapt, return with new strategies. The mind is not a territory you conquer once. It is a territory you must govern daily. Second, you must develop what I call command presence over your own thoughts. Just as I would not allow insubordination in my ranks, you cannot allow insubordinate thoughts to run unchecked through your mind. When fear speaks, you acknowledge it, but do not obey it. When doubt questions, you answer with evidence of your capabilities. When distraction calls, you redirect with the discipline of a general positioning troops. Third, you must feed your mind like you feed an army. I studied maps, terrain, weather patterns, enemy movements. I consumed intelligence constantly because I knew that superior information leads to superior decisions. Your mind requires the same nourishment: books that challenge you, ideas that stretch you, knowledge that arms you for the battles ahead. But let me ask you this: what thoughts have you been allowing to run unchecked in your mind? What internal conversations have you been losing? What mental territory have you surrendered to fear, to doubt, to the comfortable lie that you are not capable of more? Every morning when you wake, you have a choice. You can allow your mind to be occupied by your enemies, worry, doubt, fear, distraction, or you can take command. You can set the agenda for your thoughts instead of letting your thoughts set the agenda for your day. I never entered a battle hoping to win. Hope is not a strategy. I entered every battle knowing I would win because I had already won it in my mind. I had visualized victory, planned for contingencies, prepared my thoughts like I prepared my troops. This is not positive thinking. This is strategic thinking. This is not wishful visualization. This is tactical preparation. Your mind is the most important territory you will ever govern. Lose control of it, and you lose control of everything. Master it, and everything else becomes possible. The battle for your future is being fought right. Now, in your head. Are you winning it? You will fall. This is not pessimism. This is physics. What rises must encounter resistance. What climbs must face the pull of gravity. What ascends must eventually meet forces that seek to bring it down. Fell from the heights of empire to the depths of exile. From commanding millions to commanding my own thoughts on a rocky island. From reshaping the map of Europe to pacing the shores of St. Helena. The fall was inevitable. The rise that preceded it made it so. But here is what separates legends from footnotes. How you use the fall. Most men fall and stay fallen. They hit the ground and decide the ground is their new home. They make peace with mediocrity. They tell themselves stories about how the fall proves they never belonged at the heights anyway. They use their descent as evidence that they should never have ascended. This is the thinking of peasants. The fall is not your punishment. The fall is your education. When I was exiled to Elba, I could have chosen to see it as my ending, a glorious career concluded in humiliation. Instead, I chose to see it as my intermission, a pause between acts, not the final curtain. I studied what went wrong. I planned what would go right. I used exile as preparation, not surrender. Every fall teaches you something that success never could. Success teaches you what works. Failure teaches you what doesn't. Success shows you your strengths. Failure reveals your weaknesses. Success confirms your strategies. Failure exposes your blind spots. But here's what most people don't understand about falling. The ground is not your enemy. The ground is your foundation for the next leap. When you fall, you have two choices. You can fall like a stone, hitting the ground and staying there, collecting dust, and telling stories of when you once flew. Or you can fall like a warrior, hitting the ground, already planning your next assault, using the impact as the first step of your comeback. I chose to fall like a warrior, but let me ask you this. When you fall, what do? Do you look around to see who witnessed your descent? Do you spend energy managing the embarrassment? Do you waste time explaining why it wasn't really your fault? Or do you do what conquerors do? Conquerors fall in private and rise in public. When I returned from Elba, I did not return apologetically. I did not return asking for permission. I did not return explaining my previous defeat. I returned as if I had never been gone, as if the exile had been my choice, as if I was exactly where I belonged. This is how you rise after falling, not with explanations, but with actions, not with apologies, but with achievements, not with justifications, but with results. The rise is optional because it requires something most people do not possess, the willingness to be uncomfortable while rebuilding. When you fall, everything in you wants to stay down. Down is safe. Down is predictable. Down requires no risk of falling again, but down is also defeat. Rising requires you to risk falling again. Rising requires you to face the same forces that brought you down the first time. Rising requires you to bet on yourself when the evidence suggests you might be a bad bet. This is why most people stay fallen, not because they cannot rise, but because rising demands more courage than falling. Your fall is not evidence of your weakness. Your fall is proof of your ambition. Only those who reach for something higher can fall from something greater. Only those who attempt the extraordinary risk, the extraordinary failure. The mediocre do not fall because they never climb high enough to have far to fall. But you are not mediocre. Your fall proves it. Your willingness to risk it again will confirm it. The fall is inevitable because greatness always attracts opposition. The rise is optional because it requires you to choose courage over comfort, action over analysis, forward over backward. I fell from emperor to exile, but I rose from exile to legend. Your fall is not your ending, it is your beginning. The question is not whether you will fall, you will. The question is whether you will use that fall as a foundation or a grave. Choose wisely. The world is watching. They said no to me more often than they said yes. The French Directory rejected my early plans. The military establishment dismissed my unconventional tactics. Europe's royal houses refused to accept a Corsican upstart as their equal. Even my own marshals questioned my boldest campaigns. Every no was a gift. Every rejection was a redirection toward something greater. Most men hear no and stop. I heard no and pivoted. When one door closes, the wise man does not waste time mourning the door. He searches for the window, the tunnel, the path that was always there but hidden from view. Rejection is not the universe telling you to quit. Rejection is the universe telling you to get creative. When the Directory rejected my Italian campaign plans, I could have accepted their judgment. I could have fallen in line with conventional military thinking. Instead, I took their rejection as confirmation that conventional thinking would never make me extraordinary. I modified my approach, found new allies, and launched campaigns that rewrote the rules of warfare. When Europe rejected my legitimacy as emperor, I could have sought their approval. I could have moderated my ambitions to gain their acceptance. Instead, I took their rejection as proof that I was threatening the old order, exactly what I intended to do. I used their resistance as fuel for conquest, but here's what most people don't understand about rejection. It is rarely about you, and almost always about them. When someone says no to your idea, they are revealing their limitations, not yours. When someone rejects your proposal, they are showing you their boundaries, not your potential. When someone dismisses your vision, they are demonstrating their inability to see what you see, not your inability to achieve what you dream. Rejection is reconnaissance. It tells you who your allies are and who your obstacles are. It shows you which paths are crowded with the ordinary and which paths are clear for the extraordinary. Every rejection contains intelligence. What are they afraid of? What threatens them about your success? What would change if you succeeded? Use this intelligence. It is more valuable than approval. But let me ask you this. How many doors have you stopped knocking on after the first no? How many dreams have you abandoned after the first rejection? How many opportunities have you missed because you interpreted redirection as defeat? The weak see rejection as judgment. The strong see rejection as navigation. When I was rejected by the Naval Academy, I did not interpret this as evidence that I was not meant for military greatness. I interpreted it as evidence that my greatness would come through land warfare, not naval warfare. When I was passed over for early promotions, I did not see this as proof of my inadequacy. I saw it as proof that I would have to create my own opportunities instead of waiting for others to create them for me. This is the mindset that transforms rejection into redirection. You trust your vision more than you trust their judgment. Most people experience rejection and immediately begin to doubt themselves. Was I wrong about my abilities? Was I foolish to think I could achieve this? Should I lower my expectations? Should I choose something safer? These are the wrong questions. The right questions are, what is this rejection teaching me about my approach? What doors is this closed? Door pointing me toward? How can I use this information to strengthen my next attempt? What opportunity is hidden in this obstacle? Rejection forces evolution. When your first plan is rejected, you must create a second plan. When your obvious path is blocked, you must find the hidden path. When your conventional approach fails, you must innovate an unconventional approach. This is why rejected men often become more successful than accepted men. Acceptance breeds complacency. Rejection breeds creativity. I was rejected so often that I became a master of alternative approaches. When diplomacy was rejected, I used warfare. When warfare was rejected, I used politics. When politics was rejected, I used charm. When charm was rejected, I used fear. I became adaptable because I had to become adaptable. Rejection is not your enemy. It is your trainer. It is preparing you for bigger battles, better opportunities, greater victories. The next time someone says no to you, thank them. They have just shown you that you need a better plan, a different approach, a more creative solution. Rejection is redirection. Trust the process. Follow the path it reveals. A loss is only a loss if you learn nothing from it. Otherwise, it is tuition paid to the University of Reality. And reality is the most expensive school in the world, but it also grants the most valuable degrees. I have paid more tuition to reality than most men could afford. Austerlitz taught me the power of deception. Gina showed me the value of speed. But my losses taught me everything else. The retreat from Moscow taught me about logistics. Leipzig taught me about coalitions. Waterloo taught me about timing. Each loss was a master class in what not to do, when not to act, how not to think. Most men experience loss and call it bad luck. I experienced loss and called it intelligence gathering. Every loss contains data, information about your preparation, your strategy, your execution, your assumptions. The question is not whether you will lose. You will. The question is whether you will extract that data or waste it on self-pity. When I lost my first command in Italy, I could have blamed politics, favoritism, the incompetence of my superiors. Instead, I studied every decision that led to that moment. I analyzed my communications, my troop movements, my resource allocation. I treated my failure like a battlefield autopsy. That analysis made me unbeatable in my next command. This is what separates champions from casualties. Champions audit their losses like accountants audit books. They examine every line item. They question every assumption. They trace every decision back to its origin and forward to its consequence. But here's what most people don't understand about loss. It reveals truths that victory conceals. Victory can mask poor preparation if you get lucky. Victory can hide bad strategy if your opponent makes worse mistakes. Victory can conceal weak fundamentals if circumstances favor you. Loss strips away all the camouflage and shows you exactly where you stand. When I lost in Russia, I could not blame my soldiers' courage. They were brave beyond measure. I could not blame my officers' competence. They executed brilliantly. I had to face the truth. I had underestimated winter, overestimated my supply lines, and miscalculated the Russian willingness to burn their own cities. These were not comfortable truths, but they were necessary truths. Most people avoid necessary truths because they are painful. They prefer comfortable lies because they require no change, no growth, no admission of error. They waste their losses by explaining them away instead of learning from them. But let me ask you this. What losses have you wasted? What failures have you dismissed as bad luck instead of examining as bad strategy? What defeats have you blamed on circumstances instead of studying as education? Every loss you waste is intelligence you could have used in your next campaign. The elite do not lose less than others. They learn more from their losses than others. When you lose, you have a choice. You can focus on the pain of losing or the lessons of losing. You can dwell on what went wrong or discover why it went wrong. You can waste time feeling sorry for yourself or invest time preparing for your comeback. I chose to invest. Every loss became research for my next victory. But extraction requires discipline. Loss is emotional. Learning is analytical. Most people cannot make the transition from feeling their loss to studying their loss. They get stuck in the emotion and miss the education. This is why timing matters. Immediately after a loss, feel it fully. Allow yourself to experience the disappointment, the frustration, the pain. Do not suppress it or pretend it doesn't matter, but set a deadline for the emotion After that deadline, shift from feeling to thinking, from experiencing to analyzing, from victim to strategist. What specific decisions led to this outcome? What information did I lack? What skills did I need that I didn't possess? What assumptions proved false? What patterns can I identify? What would I do differently? These questions transform loss from waste into wealth. I lost battles, but never wasted them. I lost campaigns, but always extracted their lessons. I lost an empire, but gained insights that made me immortal. Your losses are not accidents. They are appointments with reality. Keep the appointments. Take notes. Apply the lessons. The man who wastes his losses stays ordinary. The man who minds his losses becomes extraordinary. Pain is not your enemy. Pain is your instructor. And unlike other teachers, pain never lies, never flatters, never allows you to deceive yourself about your true condition. I have felt pain that would break lesser men. The agony of watching my Grande Armée freeze to death in Russian snow. The humiliation of abdication while my enemies carved up my empire. The isolation of exile while Europe celebrated my defeat. Pain has been my most consistent companion and my most honest teacher. But here's what I learned that most men never do. Pain is not punishment. Pain is information. When your body feels pain, it is telling you something is wrong. When your mind feels pain, it is telling you something must change. When your spirit feels pain, it is telling you something must grow. Most people experience pain and immediately seek to escape it. They numb it with distractions, drown it in comfort, medicate it with pleasure. They treat pain like an enemy to be defeated instead of a teacher to be consulted. This is why they remain weak. Pain is nature's way of forcing evolution. When comfort fails to motivate you, pain steps in to educate you. When pleasure fails to change you, pain arrives to transform you. When ease fails to strengthen you, pain appears to forge you. The retreat from Moscow was agony beyond description. Men died of cold, hunger, exhaustion. I watched soldiers I loved disappear into the white silence of winter. Every step was torment. Every mile was torture. But that pain taught me lessons no victory could have provided. It taught me about logistics, about winter warfare, about the limits of human endurance. It taught me about leadership under impossible conditions, about morale when hope seems lost, about the difference between strategic retreat and chaotic rout. That pain made me a better general than any triumph could have. But here's what most people don't understand about pain. It only teaches those who are willing to be taught. Pain can either make you bitter or make you better. The choice is yours. It can either harden your heart or strengthen your resolve. It can either defeat your spirit or forge your character. The difference lies not in the pain itself, but in your relationship with the pain. When pain arrives, and it will arrive, you can ask victim questions or victor questions. Victim questions sound like this: why me? Why now? Why is this happening? These questions have no useful answers and lead nowhere productive. Victor questions sound like this: what is this teaching me? What must I change? What strength am I developing? How will this make me more capable? These questions transform pain from meaningless suffering into meaningful education. But let me ask you this: when pain visits you, do you listen to its lessons, or do you simply endure its presence? Do you extract its wisdom, or do you merely survive its punishment? Pain is not democratic. It does not affect everyone equally. Some people experience pain and become weaker. Others experience pain and become stronger. The pain is the same. The response is different. I chose to become stronger. When I was exiled to Elba, the pain of losing everything I had built could have destroyed me. Instead, I used that pain as fuel for planning my return. The humiliation became motivation. The loss became determination. The exile became preparation. 100 days later, I was back in Paris. This is how you transform pain into power. You refuse to waste it on self-pity, and instead invest it in self-improvement. Pain reveals what matters to you. If losing something doesn't hurt, it wasn't important. If failure doesn't sting, you weren't truly invested. Pain shows you where your real values lie, what your genuine priorities are, what you actually care about beneath all the pretense. Pain also reveals what you're capable of. You discover strengths you didn't know you possessed. You find reserves of endurance you didn't know existed. You develop skills you never thought you needed. But most importantly, pain teaches you empathy for others who suffer, wisdom about what truly matters, and humility about your own mortality. The man who avoids pain remains a child. The man who embraces pain becomes a warrior. Your pain is not meaningless. It is not random. It is not without purpose. Your pain is your teacher, and it is trying to graduate you to the next level of your potential. Stop running from the lesson. Start learning from the instructor. There comes a moment in every defeat when you must stop tending your wounds and start planning your comeback. That moment is sooner than you think and more important than you know. When I retreated from Moscow, my army was bleeding, literally and figuratively. Men were dying, morale was shattered, equipment was lost. I could have spent weeks lamenting our condition, cataloging our losses, mourning our dead. But generals do not have the luxury of extended grief. While I grieved for my fallen soldiers, I simultaneously planned our survival. While I acknowledged our desperate situation, I simultaneously architected our escape. The moment you stop planning is the moment you start dying. Most men, when wounded, focus entirely on their wounds. They examine their injuries obsessively. They replay their defeats endlessly. They nurse their pain like it was their most precious possession. This is the thinking that keeps men defeated. Your wounds are important, but they are not the most important thing. Your pain is real, but it is not your reality. Your setback is significant, but it is not your story. Your comeback is your story. But comeback requires you to shift from bleeding to building, from analyzing what went wrong to planning what will go right. The transition from victim to strategist is not automatic. It requires a conscious decision, a deliberate choice, a mental pivot from looking backward to looking forward. When I was exiled to Elba, I could have spent my days reliving Waterloo, analyzing every decision, wondering what might have been different. Instead, I spent my days studying maps of France, planning routes back to Paris, calculating the loyalty of various military units. I stopped bleeding and started planning. But here's what most people don't understand about planning after defeat. It requires you to think differently than you thought before. The same thinking that led to your defeat cannot lead to your victory. The same strategies that failed you cannot save you. The same approach that brought you down cannot lift you up. You must evolve your thinking before you can execute your comeback. This is why planning after defeat is more difficult than planning after victory. Victory confirms your methods. Defeat demands you question everything. When you plan your comeback, you cannot simply return to what you were doing before. You must advance to what you should have been doing all along. What new skills must you develop? What old habits must you abandon? What assumptions must you challenge? What strategies must you create? But let me ask you this. How long have you been bleeding from your last defeat? How much time have you spent examining your wounds instead of planning your recovery? How much energy have you invested in understanding what went wrong instead of designing what will go right? Bleeding is passive. Planning is active. Bleeding keeps you stuck in the past. Planning propels you toward the future. The most dangerous time in any defeat is not when you first fall. It's when you get comfortable on the ground, when you stop feeling urgency about getting back up, when you start accepting defeat as your new normal. This is when bleeding becomes a lifestyle instead of a temporary condition. Successful men have a built-in timer. They allow themselves a specific amount of time to process defeat, to feel it, understand it, learn from it. But when that timer expires, they shift immediately into planning mode. How long should you bleed? Long enough to extract the lessons, but not so long that you forget how to fight. I gave myself exactly 30 days on Elba to process my defeat. 30 days to understand what went wrong. 30 days to feel the full weight of losing everything I had built. On day 31, I started planning my return. This is the discipline that separates champions from casualties, the ability to set a deadline on defeat and meet a schedule for comeback. Your wounds will heal whether you focus on them or not. Your comeback will only happen if you plan it, prepare for it, and pursue it with the same intensity you once brought to your original goals. Stop examining your scars. Start designing your strategy. Stop replaying your defeats. Start planning your victories. Stop bleeding. Start building. The world doesn't care about your wounds, but it will remember your comeback if you have the courage to plan it and the discipline to execute it. Victory does not belong to the kind. It does not reward the gentle. It does not favor those who seek everyone's approval or those who fear making difficult decisions. Victory belongs to the ruthless, not ruthless toward people, but ruthless toward everything that stands between you and your goals. I was ruthless with my own comfort. I slept on the ground with my soldiers while other generals enjoyed warm beds. I was ruthless with my own fears. I led charges personally while other commanders directed from safety. I was ruthless with my own excuses. I accepted no justification for failure, including my own. But here is what most people misunderstand about ruthlessness. It is not cruelty toward others. It is clarity about priorities. When I say be ruthless, I do not mean be heartless. I mean be focused. I mean be decisive. I mean be willing to cut away everything that weakens your position, delays your progress, or dilutes your power. Most people fail because they are too kind to their own weaknesses. They negotiate with their fears instead of conquering them. They compromise with their laziness instead of defeating it. They excuse their procrastination instead of eliminating it. This kindness to weakness is cruelty to potential. Victory requires you to be your own worst enemy's worst enemy. Every excuse you make, every comfort you choose over challenge, every easy path you take instead of the right path, these are the enemies of your success. Be ruthless with them. When I planned the invasion of Italy, conventional wisdom said it was impossible. The Alps were too treacherous, the logistics too complex, the risks too great. I could have listened to conventional wisdom. I could have chosen a safer, more comfortable approach. Instead, I was ruthless with conventional wisdom. I ignored the doubters, dismissed the critics, and executed what others called impossible. This is what ruthlessness looks like in practice. The willingness to ignore popular opinion when it conflicts with strategic necessity. But let me ask you this. What are you being too kind to in your own life? What weaknesses are you negotiating with instead of eliminating? What comfortable habits are you preserving when you should be destroying them? Ruthlessness begins with honest assessment. You must look at your life like a general surveys a battlefield. What serves your objectives and what sabotages them? What moves you toward victory and what keeps you in defeat? Everything that sabotages your objectives must go. Everything that keeps you in defeat must be eliminated. No exceptions, no negotiations, no mercy. Most people want to keep their bad habits and somehow still achieve their great goals. They want to remain comfortable and somehow still accomplish the uncomfortable. They want to avoid difficult decisions and somehow still reach difficult destinations. This is not possible. Victory demands sacrifice, not sacrifice of what you need, but sacrifice of what you think you want. Not sacrifice of what serves you, but sacrifice of what weakens you. I sacrificed sleep to study strategy. I sacrificed comfort to share hardships with my men. I sacrificed popularity to make necessary decisions. I sacrificed the ordinary to achieve the extraordinary. But here's what most people don't understand about sacrifice. It is not loss. It is investment. When you sacrifice immediate comfort for long-term achievement, you are not losing comfort. You are investing it in something greater. When you sacrifice easy pleasures for difficult progress, you are not losing pleasure. You are upgrading it. The ruthless Understand that everything has a cost. Comfort costs achievement. Popularity costs leadership. Safety costs growth. The question is not whether you will pay a cost. You will. The question is whether you will choose your cost or let it choose you. I chose to pay the cost of discipline instead of paying the cost of regret. I chose to pay the cost of difficult decisions instead of paying the cost of missed opportunities. I chose to pay the cost of temporary discomfort instead of paying the cost of permanent mediocrity. Be ruthless with anything that costs you your future. Be ruthless with any habit that weakens your position. Be ruthless with any thought that diminishes your power. But be kind to your potential. Be gentle with your dreams. Be patient with your progress. Victory loves the ruthless because the ruthless love victory more than they love their limitations. The question is not whether you can be ruthless. The question is whether you can afford not to be. You cannot defeat an enemy you cannot name. You cannot conquer a force you cannot identify. You cannot win a war against opponents you refuse to acknowledge exist. I knew my enemies intimately, not just the obvious ones, the British, the Austrians, the Russians who opposed me on battlefields. I knew my internal enemies, my tendency toward impatience, my pride that sometimes clouded my judgment, my ambition that occasionally outran my resources. Every great campaign begins with intelligence gathering. Every victory starts with enemy identification. Before you can plan your attack, you must know what you are attacking. Most people lose battles they never knew they were fighting. They struggle against forces they cannot name. They are defeated by enemies they refuse to see. Your real enemies are not the people who oppose you. They are the forces that oppose your progress. Your real opponents are not those who compete with you. They are the obstacles that prevent you from competing. At your highest level, what are your enemies? Let me help you identify them. Fear is your enemy. Not just any fear, but the specific fears that paralyze your action. Fear of failure that prevents you from attempting. Fear of success that makes you sabotage yourself. Fear of judgment that keeps you small. Fear of responsibility that makes you avoid leadership. Name your fears specifically. I am afraid is useless intelligence. I am afraid of being rejected if I propose this idea is actionable intelligence. Now you know what you are fighting. Doubt is your enemy. The voice that questions your capabilities, undermines your confidence, and provides rational-sounding reasons why you should not attempt what you dream of achieving. Doubt is cunning. It does not attack you directly. It infiltrates your thinking gradually. It poses as wisdom, disguises itself as realism, masquerades as prudence. But doubt's mission is always the same, to prevent you from acting on your potential. Comfort is your enemy, not the comfort of rest after hard work, but the comfort that replaces hard work. The comfort that chooses ease over excellence, convenience over conquest, the familiar over the extraordinary. Comfort is seductive. It promises you that you can achieve your goals without changing your habits, reach your dreams without leaving your current reality, become extraordinary while remaining ordinary. Comfort lies. Distraction is your enemy. In my era, distractions were limited. Correspondence, social obligations, the immediate demands of military life. In your era, distractions are infinite. Every device competes for your attention. Every platform demands your focus. Every notification fragments your concentration. Distraction's strategy is simple. Keep you so busy responding to the urgent that you never focus on the important. But let me ask you this. Which of these enemies has captured the most territory? In your life? Which one controls your decisions most often? Which one has the strongest influence over your daily actions? The enemy that controls the most territory is your primary opponent. This is where you must focus your initial assault. But here's what most people don't understand about fighting internal enemies. You cannot defeat them by avoiding them. You can only defeat them by engaging them. When fear whispers that you are not ready, you do not defeat fear by waiting until you feel ready. You defeat fear by acting despite not feeling ready. When doubt questions your abilities, you do not defeat doubt by gathering more evidence of your competence. You defeat doubt by producing results that make doubt irrelevant. When comfort tempts you to choose the easy path, you do not defeat comfort by making the easy path more difficult. You defeat comfort by choosing the difficult path repeatedly until it becomes your preferred path. I fought coalitions of European powers, but my greatest victories came from fighting coalitions of internal enemies. When I conquered my impatience, I could wait for the right moment to strike. When I conquered my pride, I could retreat when necessary. When I conquered my comfort, I could endure hardships that broke other men. Your external battles are temporary. Your internal battles are eternal. But every internal victory makes every external victory more likely. Define your enemies. Clearly, engage them directly. Defeat them systematically. You cannot win a war against opponents you will not acknowledge. But once you name them, you can defeat them. Destruction is easy. Any fool can tear down. Any amateur can demolish. Any child can break what took years to build. But reconstruction requires the mind of an architect, the discipline of an engineer, and the patience of a master craftsman. When I returned from Elba, I was not simply resuming where I left off. I was rebuilding an empire from exile, reconstructing an army from scattered loyalists, recreating authority from the ashes of abdication. But I did not rebuild randomly. I did not reconstruct carelessly. I did not recreate chaotically. I rebuilt with precision. Precision means every decision serves a strategic purpose. Every action advances a specific objective. Every resource allocation moves you closer to a defined goal. Precision is the difference between busy work and breakthrough work. Most people rebuild by doing what feels good instead of what works well. They take action to feel productive rather than to produce results. They confuse motion with progress, activity with achievement, effort with effectiveness. This is why most rebuilds fail. When I planned my return from Elba, I did not simply decide to try harder or do better. I analyzed exactly what had led to my defeat, identified precisely what needed to change, and designed specifically how to implement those changes. Precision begins with diagnosis. Before you can rebuild effectively, you must understand accurately what needs rebuilding and why it failed originally. What specific systems broke down, what particular skills were missing, what exact processes failed, what precise assumptions proved false. Vague diagnosis leads to vague reconstruction. I need to improve is not precise enough to guide effective action. I need to improve my decision-making under pressure by developing better information-gathering systems and testing my judgment against smaller stakes before applying it to larger ones is precise enough to guide effective action. But here's what most people don't understand about precision. It requires you to prioritize ruthlessly. You cannot rebuild everything simultaneously. You cannot fix all problems at once. You cannot develop every skill concurrently. Precision means choosing the few critical elements that, if rebuilt properly, will have the greatest impact on your overall reconstruction. When I returned from exile, I could have tried to rebuild my entire empire immediately. Instead, I focused precisely on rebuilding my core, loyal military units, strategic alliances, and popular support. Everything else was secondary until these fundamentals were secured. This is the architecture of precision. Foundation first, structure second, decoration last. What are the fundamental elements of your life that, if rebuilt correctly, would support everything else you want to achieve? What are the core skills that, if developed fully, would make every other challenge more manageable? Focus there first. Master those fundamentals. Build that foundation with obsessive attention to detail. But let me ask you this. What are you trying to rebuild right now? Are you rebuilding with the same thinking that created the original failure? Are you using the same methods that led to the original breakdown? Precision requires you to upgrade your approach, not just repeat your effort. If your previous approach to time management failed, you need a more precise system for managing time, not just more willpower to use the same failing system. If your previous approach to skill development was ineffective, you need a more precise method for developing skills, not just more hours using the same ineffective method. Precision also means measurement. You cannot rebuild precisely without measuring precisely. How will you know if your reconstruction is working? What metrics will indicate progress? What benchmarks will confirm success? I measured my reconstruction by specific indicators. How? Many troops responded to my call, how quickly they reached designated positions, how effectively they executed new strategies. These measurements guided my adjustments and confirmed my progress. Your reconstruction must be measurable, or it will be mediocre. Most people rebuild by feeling rather than by metrics. They gauge their progress by how they feel about their efforts, rather than by objective evidence of their results. Feelings fluctuate. Metrics reveal truth. Rebuild with precision. Diagnose specifically, prioritize ruthlessly, execute systematically, measure constantly. Your comeback is too important to rebuild carelessly. Your future is too valuable to reconstruct randomly. Build it right. Build it strong. Build it to last. Respect after victory is cheap. Anyone can command respect when they are winning, when they are powerful, when they hold all the advantages. But respect after failure, that is the rarest currency in human interaction. When I returned from Elba, I had no army waiting for me, no treasury filled with gold, no guaranteed allies. I had only my reputation, my strategic mind, and my ability to command respect from men who had every reason to doubt me. Within days, soldiers sent to arrest me were marching under my command. Officers who had sworn loyalty to the king were pledging allegiance to their former emperor. An entire nation that had accepted my exile was welcoming my return. How does a defeated man command such respect? How does a fallen leader inspire such loyalty? How does an exile transform into an emperor again? The answer lies in understanding what respect really is and how to earn it after you have lost it. Respect is not about what you have accomplished. Respect is about who you are when you have nothing left to prove it with. Respect is not about your successes. It is about your character when success abandons you. Most people believe that failure destroys respect. This is false. Failure only destroys the respect that was based on superficial things, your position, your wealth, your winning streak. But failure cannot destroy the respect that is based on substantial things, your integrity, your competence, your courage. When I lost my empire, I lost the respect of those who followed me for my power. But I retained the respect of those who followed me for my leadership. The first group abandoned me immediately. The second group welcomed me back. The difference was not in my external circumstances. Those had clearly deteriorated. The difference was in their understanding of what made me worthy of respect in the first place. But here's what most people don't understand about commanding respect after failure. You cannot demand it. You can only demonstrate it. Respect after failure is earned through your response to failure, not despite your failure. It comes from how you handle defeat, not from denying defeat happened. It grows from your character in crisis, not from your comfort in success. When failure comes, most people either become bitter or become broken. Both responses destroy respect. Bitterness makes you small. Being broken makes you weak. Neither inspires confidence in your future capabilities. But there is a third response. Become better. When you become better because of failure instead of bitter because of failure, people notice. When you use defeat as education instead of allowing it to diminish, you people pay attention. When you demonstrate growth through adversity instead of deterioration through difficulty, people respect that transformation. But let me ask you this. How have you responded to your failures? Have you allowed them to make you bitter about your circumstances or better at handling circumstances? Have you used them as excuses for why you cannot succeed, or as education for how you will succeed? Your response to failure is being watched more carefully than your response to success. Everyone expects you to handle success well. Few expect you to handle failure with grace, wisdom, and strength. This is your opportunity. The respect you command after failure is more valuable than the respect you commanded before failure, because it is based on tested character rather than untested potential. When people see you handle defeat with dignity, they trust you will handle victory with humility. When they watch you learn from mistakes instead of repeating them, they believe you will make better decisions in the future. When they observe you rebuilding systematically instead of complaining constantly, they want to be part of your comeback. But commanding respect after failure requires you to respect yourself first. You must believe in your capacity for comeback before others will believe in it. You must demonstrate confidence in your future before others will invest in it. This is not arrogance, it is self-respect. Arrogance denies failure happened. Self-respect acknowledges failure happened and uses it as fuel for improvement. I did not return from Elba apologizing for my exile. I returned as if my exile had been strategic preparation for my restoration. I did not ask for permission to lead. Again, I demonstrated that I was still capable of leadership. Command respect through your comeback, not through your comfort. Show them who you are when everything goes wrong, not just when everything goes right. The same tactics that lost the last war cannot win the next war. The same strategies that led to your defeat will lead to your defeat again. The same thinking that created your failure will create your failure again. Adaptation is not optional. It is survival. I learned this lesson in the most brutal classroom possible, the battlefield. Early in my career, I succeeded with conventional tactics, speed, concentration of force, decisive action. These methods won me Italy, Austria, Prussia. But my enemies adapted. They studied my victories, analyzed my methods, developed countermeasures. By the time of Leipzig, they had learned to use my own strategies against me. They moved faster than I expected, concentrated their forces more effectively than I anticipated, acted more decisively than I planned for. I had become predictable. Predictability on a battlefield is death. The same is true in life. When you become predictable, you become vulnerable. When your opponents know your patterns, they can prepare defenses against them. When your methods become routine, they lose their power to surprise, overwhelm, and overcome. Most people, when they experience failure, make a fatal error. They try to succeed again using the exact same approach that failed them before. They work harder, but not smarter. They increase intensity, but not intelligence. They double down on failed strategies instead of developing superior ones. This is why most people fail repeatedly in the same ways. If your previous approach to business failed, doing the same thing with more effort will not make it succeed. If your previous method of learning was ineffective, studying longer with the same method will not make it effective. If your previous way of leading produced poor results, leading more forcefully with the same style will not produce better results. Adaptation requires you to question everything you thought you knew about success in your field. But here's what most people don't understand about adaptation. It is not abandoning what worked. It is evolving what worked to work better against new challenges. When I adapted my military strategies, I did not abandon the principles of warfare that had made me successful. I evolved those principles to address the new realities of facing enemies who had learned to counter my previous methods. Speed remained important, but I had to find new ways to achieve speed. Concentration of force remained critical, but I had to develop new methods of concentration. Decisive action remained necessary, but I had to identify new moments for decision. The principles endured. The practices evolved. This is the art of strategic adaptation. Preserve the foundations that remain valid while renovating the methods that have become obsolete. What are the enduring principles of success in your field? What are the timeless fundamentals that work regardless of changing circumstances? These are your foundations. Protect them, strengthen them, build upon them. But what are the specific methods, tactics, and approaches that your opponents have learned to counter? What strategies have your competitors adapted to neutralize? What techniques have market conditions made less effective? These must evolve, or they will ensure your defeat. But let me ask you this. What patterns have you established that your competition can predict? What methods have you repeated so often that they have become your signature weakness? What approaches have you relied on so heavily that they have become your exploitable vulnerability? Adaptation begins with honest assessment of your own predictability. Where have you become too comfortable with familiar methods? Where have you stopped innovating because previous innovations worked? Where have you chosen the convenience of repetition over the challenge of evolution? The enemy of adaptation is success. Success makes you believe that what worked before will work again. Success convinces you that your methods are timeless when they may simply be temporary. Success breeds the dangerous confidence that you have found permanent solutions to evolving problems. But adaptation also requires courage. It requires the courage to abandon methods that once brought you victory. It requires the courage to risk failure while learning new approaches. It requires the courage to appear temporarily incompetent while developing new competencies. I adapted my artillery tactics, my cavalry charges, my infantry formations. Some adaptations succeeded immediately. Others required multiple iterations. All required the willingness to risk short-term setbacks for long-term advantages. Your next victory will not come from perfecting your last strategy. It will come from evolving beyond your last strategy. Adapt or be defeated again. The choice is yours, but the consequences are certain. There is no such thing as a perfect victory. This is the most dangerous lie ever told to ambitious men. The myth of flawless triumph has destroyed more potential than honest failure ever could. I won Austerlitz, my greatest victory. The enemy was shattered, their army scattered, their confidence broken. Historians call it a masterpiece of military strategy. But I know the truth. Austerlitz succeeded despite multiple mistakes, several miscalculations, and at least 3 moments when fortune alone saved my plans from disaster. Perfect victory is a story we tell after the battle, not a reality we experience. During it, every victory is messy. Every triumph includes mistakes. Every conquest involves compromises. Every achievement requires sacrifices that, in perfect scenarios, would be unnecessary. But most people paralyze themselves pursuing perfection instead of pursuing progress. They wait for the perfect plan instead of executing a good plan. They delay action until they can guarantee flawless results instead of accepting that valuable results always include some flaws. This perfectionist thinking has killed more dreams than criticism, more ambitions than competition, more potential than failure. The pursuit of perfect victory prevents you from achieving actual victory. When I planned the Italian campaign, my strategies were not perfect. My resources were insufficient, my intelligence incomplete, my logistics imperfect. But my plans were good enough to begin, strong enough to succeed, and flexible enough to improve during execution. Perfect planning would have meant never beginning, but here's what most people don't understand about victory. It is not the absence of problems. It is the intelligent management of problems. Every victory includes unexpected obstacles. Every success requires solving unforeseen challenges. Every achievement demands adapting to changing circumstances. The ability to handle imperfection during pursuit is more valuable than the ability to create perfection before pursuit. Victory belongs to those who can execute imperfect plans perfectly, not to those who can create perfect plans they never execute. But the myth of perfect victory creates more than just delay. It creates shame about real victories. When you achieve something significant but imperfect, the perfectionist mindset prevents you from celebrating your achievement. Instead of recognizing your victory, you focus on its flaws. Instead of building confidence from your success, you develop doubt about your methods. This shame about imperfect victory is more destructive than the sting of honest defeat. I conquered most of Europe with imperfect victories. Each campaign included mistakes I wished I could undo, opportunities I wished I had seized, decisions I wished I had made differently. But those imperfect victories built an empire, shaped history, and demonstrated possibilities that perfect planning alone could never have achieved. But let me ask you this: what victories have you failed to recognize because they were not perfect? What achievements have you diminished because they included flaws? What successes have you dismissed because they did not match your ideal vision? Your imperfect victories are still victories. Your flawed successes are still successes. Your compromised achievements are still achievements. Recognize them, celebrate them, learn from them, build upon them. The perfectionist mindset also creates false comparisons. You compare your behind-the-scenes reality with others' highlight reels. You compare your messy process with their polished presentations. You compare your visible struggles with their invisible advantages. These comparisons are not just unfair, they are impossible. You never see the full story of others' victories. You see their results, not their struggles. You see their triumphs, not their mistakes. You see their confidence, not their doubts. Every victory looks perfect from the outside and feels chaotic from the inside. The commanders you admire achieved imperfect victories. The leaders you respect made flawed decisions. The heroes you study succeeded despite mistakes, not because they avoided them. Your next victory will not be perfect either. It will include errors, require corrections, and demand compromises. But it will still be victory, and victory, even imperfect victory, is infinitely more valuable than perfect planning that never results in action. Stop pursuing perfect victory. Start pursuing actual victory. Stop waiting for flawless conditions. Start creating valuable outcomes. Stop demanding perfection from your process. Start demanding progress from your efforts. Perfect victory is a myth. Actual victory is achievable. The underdog role is not a burden. It is a weapon. It is not a disadvantage. It is an advantage disguised as a disadvantage. It is not something to escape. It is something to exploit. I was born a Corsican in a French world, an outsider in an insider's game, a nobody in a system designed for somebodies. My accent marked me as foreign. My origins marked me as inferior. My ambitions marked me as delusional. I was the ultimate underdog, and I used every ounce of that status to fuel my rise. Most people see being underestimated as an insult. I saw it as intelligence. When your enemies underestimate you, they prepare inadequately for you. When your competitors dismiss you, they fail to study you properly. When the establishment overlooks you, they leave openings you can exploit. Being underestimated is a tactical advantage if you are wise enough to use it. The underdog role comes with hidden powers that the favorite never possesses. Freedom from expectation, license to experiment, permission to fail without surprise, room to grow without scrutiny. When everyone expects you to lose, you can take risks that would be criticized if you were expected to win. When everyone doubts your capabilities, you can develop skills in secret while they focus on more obvious threats. When everyone considers you irrelevant, you can position yourself strategically while they ignore your movements. The underdog fights with nothing to lose and everything to gain. The favorite fights with everything to lose and nothing new to gain. Which position would you rather occupy? But here's what most people don't understand about the underdog role. It is temporary if you use it correctly, permanent if you waste it. The underdog advantage is most powerful in the beginning. Use it to build capabilities, gather resources, form alliances, and position yourself strategically. But do not become comfortable being underestimated. The goal is not to remain the underdog forever. The goal is to use underdog status to become the favorite. When I was an unknown artillery officer, I used my anonymity to study my superiors, understand the system, and identify opportunities. When I became a recognized general, I could no longer rely on being underestimated. I had to rely on being excellent. The underdog role is a phase, not an identity, but most people either hate the underdog role so much they waste its advantages, or they love it so much they never graduate from it. Those who hate being underestimated spend their energy trying to convince people to take them seriously, instead of using their energy to become undeniably serious. They focus on perception instead of performance, on recognition instead of results. Those who love being underestimated become addicted to the sympathy, the lower expectations, the excuses it provides. They use underdog status as a shield against accountability, instead of a sword for advancement. Both approaches waste the power of the position, but let me ask you this: are you currently in an underdog position? Are you being underestimated, overlooked, or dismissed? Instead of resenting the status, how could you exploit it? What risks could you take that would be impossible if you were the favorite? What experiments could you conduct that would be criticized if expectations were higher? What allies could you build who would be unavailable if you were seen as a threat? The underdog role grants you invisibility until you choose to reveal yourself. Use that invisibility wisely. Study your competition while they ignore you. Develop your capabilities while they focus elsewhere. Build your resources while they underestimate your potential. But remember, the underdog advantage expires the moment you prove you are not an underdog. Once you demonstrate your capabilities, you can never again rely on being underestimated. You must then rely on being excellent. This is why timing matters. Strike when your capabilities exceed their expectations, but before they recognize your true strength. Move when you are still underestimated, but no longer truly inferior. The perfect moment is when you are still invisible, but no longer impotent. Struck when my enemies still saw me as a minor threat, but I had developed major capabilities. When they still considered me a regional problem, but I had built continental ambitions. When they still treated me as a temporary nuisance, but I had become a permanent force. The underdog role taught me to be resourceful, resilient, and relentless. It forced me to be better than my circumstances, stronger than my limitations, more determined than my obstacles. Love the underdog role while you have it. Use it completely, then graduate from it decisively. The meaning you assign to defeat determines the power defeat has over you. Change the meaning, change the impact, transform the definition, transform the experience. Rewire your understanding of what defeat represents, and you rewire your entire relationship with setbacks. Most people inherit their definition of defeat from others, from parents who feared failure, from teachers who punished mistakes, from a society that worships winning and demonizes losing. These inherited definitions become unconscious programming that controls your response to every setback. But programming can be changed. Definitions can be rewritten. Meanings can be transformed. When I was exiled to Elba, I could have accepted the conventional definition of my situation: disgraced emperor, failed conqueror, finished leader. Instead, I chose to define my exile differently: strategic retreat, preparation period, intermission before the next act. The facts remained the same. The meaning changed everything. This is not self-deception. This is strategic thinking. I was not denying reality. I was choosing which aspect of reality to emphasize and which story to tell myself about that reality. Reality is always complex. Every situation contains multiple truths. Every defeat includes elements of education. Every setback contains seeds of comeback. Every ending creates space for new beginnings. You cannot control what happens to you, but you can control what your experiences mean to you. But here's what most people don't understand about meaning-making. It is not about positive thinking. It is about powerful thinking. Positive thinking tries to make defeat feel good. Powerful thinking tries to make defeat useful. Positive thinking seeks comfort. Powerful thinking seeks advantage. When I redefined my defeats, I was not trying to feel better about them. I was trying to extract maximum value from them. I was not pursuing emotional comfort. I was pursuing strategic benefit. Defeat means data collection. Every failure provides information about what doesn't work, what needs improvement, what requires different approaches. This data is invaluable for future attempts. Defeat means skill development. Setbacks force you to develop capabilities you would never build during smooth success. Resilience, adaptability, creative problem-solving, emotional regulation, these skills are forged in the fire of failure. Defeat means authenticity testing. Success can mask weaknesses, but defeat reveals them. This revelation, though painful, is necessary for genuine improvement. You cannot fix problems you do not know exist. Defeat means character building. How you handle failure reveals and develops your true character. Victory shows your capabilities. Defeat shows your character. Character is more valuable than capability because capability without character leads to eventual destruction. But let me ask you this. What does defeat currently mean to you? When you experience setbacks, what story do you tell yourself about what those setbacks represent? Do you define defeat as evidence of your inadequacy or as feedback about your approach? Do you see failure as proof you should quit or as information about how to improve? Do you interpret setbacks as permanent judgments or as temporary education? Your definitions determine your responses. Your responses determine your outcomes. If defeat means I am not good enough, you will respond with self-doubt and withdrawal. If defeat means my current approach is not good enough, you will respond with analysis and adjustment. The first definition destroys confidence. The second definition builds competence. Most people never examine their inherited definitions of defeat. They unconsciously accept meanings assigned by others and then wonder why setbacks devastate them emotionally and paralyze them strategically. But you can choose new definitions. You can assign new meanings. You can rewrite the story you tell yourself about what defeat represents. Defeat is not your enemy. It is your instructor. Defeat is not your judgment. It is your education. Defeat is not your ending. It is your redirection. When you rewire what defeat means to you, you transform defeat from an obstacle into an opportunity, from a problem into a process, from a setback into a setup. The same defeat that destroys men with weak definitions strengthens men with powerful definitions. Choose your definitions carefully. They will determine whether defeat defeats you or develops you. Rewire your understanding. Transform your experience. Control your meaning. Master your response. Rebuilding is not enough. Recovery is not enough. Simply returning to where you were before defeat is not enough. If you only seek to restore your previous position, you will remain vulnerable to the same forces that brought you down originally. You must not merely recover, you must dominate. When I returned from Elba, I did not seek to become emperor again, simply to reclaim my former status. I sought to become emperor again to finish what I had started, to achieve what I had not yet achieved, to dominate the forces that had previously dominated me. This is the mindset that transforms comebacks from temporary recoveries into permanent victories. Domination is not about crushing others. It is about controlling the factors that control your success. Domination is not about power over people. It is about power over circumstances, over challenges, over the very conditions that once defeated you. Most people, after experiencing defeat, return with diminished ambitions. They set smaller goals. To reduce the risk of large failures, they choose safer paths to avoid dangerous setbacks. They moderate their dreams to minimize their disappointments. This defensive thinking guarantees mediocre results. When you return from defeat with reduced ambitions, you signal to yourself and others that defeat has taught you to expect less from life. You communicate that failure has convinced you to settle for smaller victories. But settling for less after defeat is not wisdom. It is surrender in disguise. True domination begins with the decision that your previous defeat was not a lesson to lower your standards. It was education on how to raise your capabilities. When I planned my return, I did not plan to be a more cautious emperor. I planned to be a more effective emperor. I did not seek to avoid the mistakes that led to my exile. I sought to develop the capabilities that would make those mistakes impossible. This is the difference between recovery and domination. Recovery seeks to avoid past failures. Domination seeks to transcend past limitations. But here's what most people don't understand about the will to dominate. It is not about aggression. It is about excellence. Domination means becoming so skilled, so prepared, so strategically superior that your competition becomes irrelevant. Domination means developing such overwhelming capability that obstacles become minor inconveniences rather than major threats. When you dominate your field, you do not defeat your competition. You make your competition obsolete. But domination requires a different level of commitment than mere participation. Participation allows you to compete. Domination requires you to innovate. Participation lets you follow industry standards. Domination demands you set new standards. Most people never develop the will to dominate because they fear the responsibility that domination brings. When you dominate, there is no one to blame for your failures but yourself. When you dominate, there are no excuses for poor performance. When you dominate, you become accountable for results at the highest level. This accountability terrifies most people into choosing comfortable mediocrity over demanding excellence. But let me ask you this. Are you planning a comeback or planning domination? Are you seeking to recover your previous position or to transcend your previous limitations? Are you preparing to compete at your old level or to compete at a completely new level? The will to dominate requires you to think differently about what is possible for you. It requires you to upgrade your standards, expand your capabilities, and increase your expectations of yourself. When I returned from Elba, I did not return as the same man who had been defeated. I returned as an evolved version of that man, one who had learned from defeat, grown through adversity, and developed new capabilities through challenge. I did not seek revenge on my enemies. I sought dominance over the conditions that had made me vulnerable to my enemies. This is how you develop the will to dominate. You identify every factor that contributed to your previous defeat and develop superior capability in each area. If poor preparation led to your defeat, develop overwhelming preparation. If inadequate skills caused your failure, develop exceptional skills. If strategic errors created your setback, develop strategic mastery. Do not merely address your weaknesses, transform them into strengths. Do not simply fix your problems, evolve. Beyond them entirely, the will to dominate again is not about returning to your previous position of strength. It is about advancing to a new level of strength that makes your previous defeat impossible to repeat, dominate, or remain vulnerable. The choice is yours. Words without action are poetry. Plans without execution are fantasy. Dreams without discipline are delusion. Your comeback will not be written in thoughts, hopes, or intentions. It will be written in blood and ink, in the sweat of your effort and the permanence of your results. This is where inspiration ends and initiation begins. This is where learning transforms into leading. This is where you stop being a student of comeback and start being an author of victory. I have given you the strategies, the principles, the mindset required to transform defeat into victory. But strategies without implementation are worthless. Principles without practice are powerless. Mindset without action is meaningless. The time for preparation has ended. The time for execution has begun. But writing your comeback in blood and ink requires more than knowledge. It requires courage, the courage to act despite uncertainty, the courage to begin despite imperfection, the courage to risk failure again for the possibility of success again. Most people consume endless content about success, but never create success. They study victory, but never achieve victory. They learn about comeback, but never execute comeback. This is not wisdom. This is procrastination disguised as preparation. Your comeback begins the moment you stop preparing to start and actually start. Not when conditions are perfect. They never will be. Not when you feel ready. Readiness is created through action, not waiting. Not when you have more resources. Resources are attracted to action, not acquired through hesitation. Your comeback begins now. But here's what most people don't understand about writing their comeback. It is not written once, it is written daily. Every choice you make either writes another line of your comeback story or another line of your defeat story. Every action either advances your victory or delays your victory. Every day either brings you closer to domination or keeps you trapped in mediocrity. You are writing your story, whether you realize it or not. The question is, what story are you writing? When I returned from Elba, I did not write my comeback in a single dramatic gesture. I wrote it in daily decisions, hourly choices, minute-by-minute actions. Each letter I sent, each ally I contacted, each strategy I refined was another line in my comeback story. The grand gestures are remembered by history, but the daily disciplines create the grand gestures. What lines are you writing in your comeback story today? What actions are you taking that move you from where you are to where you want to be? What decisions are you making that transform your current reality into your desired reality? But writing your comeback also requires you to stop editing your past and start creating your future. Most people spend more energy rewriting the story of their defeat than writing the story of their comeback. They replay past failures instead of planning future victories. They edit what has already happened instead of creating what could happen. The past is permanent. The future is changeable. Focus your energy where you have power to influence outcomes. Your defeat is written in permanent ink. You cannot change it, but your comeback is being written in fresh ink. You control every word. But let me ask you this final question. If you continue on your current path, what story will your life tell? If you maintain your current habits, choices, and actions, where will you be in 1 year, in 5 years, in 10 years? Is that the story you want to write? Is that the ending you want to create? Is that the legacy you want to leave? If not, then today is the day you pick up the pen and start writing a different story. Your comeback story begins with one sentence. I refuse to accept defeat as my final chapter. Then you write the next sentence with your actions, and the next sentence with your choices, and the next sentence with your discipline, line by line. Day by day, choice by choice, you write your way from defeat to victory. The pen is in your hand. The page is blank. The story is waiting. Write your comeback in blood and ink. Make it permanent. Make it powerful. Make it yours. You already have what it takes. Now go prove it.